Hi guys, so I'm really getting tired of these Brexiteers playing political games with Northern Ireland. So Barnard Jenkin, a Brexiteer, was interviewed on NewsNight about the current crisis facing Northern Ireland as a result of Brexit. Now Lord Frost and his boss Boris Johnson and the British government keep trying to sell the line that the protocol isn't working and needs to be rehashed. They have threatened to invoke Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol in order to scare the EU into compromising on the single market. Well, Barnard Jenkins was invited on to demonstrate why he shouldn't have been invited on.
There's a negotiation going on here, and this particular agreement, this unsatisfactory agreement, was also a product of a negotiation.
But it was signed. It was signed by both sides.
It was signed at a time when the government was incredibly weak and we were gripped by a political and constitutional crisis.
So you signed under duress. You signed during a political crisis. Then why did you sign? There wasn't pressure from the EU, you need to sign this now, we need to sign this immediately. You decided how the negotiations would go. You decided the time frame. The European Union were talking about 2 years for a negotiation. You said no, we want it done as soon as possible. Boris Johnson wanted to leave the European Union with a deal or without a deal in October 2019. Thanks to the Benn Act, it was postponed to 2020. Boris Johnson wanted to get out as quickly as possible. Boris Johnson was the one putting pressure on Boris Johnson, not the EU.
And I think the EU...
So go on, just spell that
well,
out.
Just a minute. The EU was taking some advantage of that situation at the time.
So you think it was a terrible deal?
Well, I personally would have been happy to vote against it. The only reason I voted for it is because there didn't seem to be an alternative.
Let me show you something. This was the vote back in 2019. And you can see all of the Conservative Party voted for this withdrawal agreement. Okay? The European Union Withdrawal Agreement Bill. Every single MP voted for it. Now, just to confirm, let me scroll down here. Where is he? Sir Barnard Jenkin. Okay, he voted for it, just to confirm that. Now, if he had a problem with it, why didn't he abstain? Why didn't he say, I can't vote for this. This is not a good deal. Instead, he voted for it. As I've said before, he could have said, look, this wasn't a good deal. I can't put my name to it. I'm sorry, Boris Johnson. I'm going to have to abstain. He didn't do that. He voted for it. So you can't turn around now and say, well, it wasn't a really good deal, or I voted for it because there was no other option on the table. There was another option. You could have abstained, but you didn't. You voted for it. You can't turn around now and say, I didn't actually agree with it. You agreed with it. Own it.
But the point is, we can go on talking about the past. The point is about the future. Is this agreement working? I think that even now the EU agrees there are aspects of this agreement that are not working.
The EU has not said that. The EU has asked you to implement the protocol, and you're not doing that. They're jumping through hoops to try and get you to implement the protocol. It's not that they're finding problems with the protocol. The EU have never highlighted any problems with the protocol. The only people who have problems with the protocol are people like you, Brexiteers in Great Britain, and Brexiteers in Northern Ireland. The DUP, for example. Businesses don't have a problem with the protocol. Political parties in Northern Ireland, apart from the DUP and some extremists, don't have a problem with the protocol. The Labour Party don't have a problem with the protocol. You people do. The EU doesn't have a problem with the protocol. The Irish government doesn't have a problem with the protocol. So you can't turn around and say, yes, the EU have a problem with the protocol, because that's not true.
That's a big shift.
But
but that's a big shift. That's a big change.
So when the Prime Minister came back and said he hailed it as a great deal, it was a breakthrough and it was all signed, by Christmas, were you sitting there thinking, I don't know what you're talking about, this is a terrible deal? Were you thinking that all along?
I was thinking, I suppose he's got to sell the deal, but it's not a great deal.
What a frigging liar. This guy is a liar. Because, as I said before, he was one of the, another one of these Boris Johnson cheerleaders. Yeah, it's a great deal, it's a great deal, it's a great deal. Boris Johnson, it's the deal of the century. it's an oven-ready deal. Where was Barnard Jenkin when Boris Johnson was trying to sell the deal to the public? Where was he standing up in public and saying, or on TV saying, no, this is not a good deal? Where was he? I can't find any videos of him saying it was a bad deal. Isn't it, maybe it's Captain Hindsight here, you know, waiting until the things go badly and then saying, yeah, I was completely against it all along. What a frigging liar this guy is.
I never thought it. I thought it, you know, we could live with it. And we've tried to live with it. We didn't kick over, we got a majority of 100. We didn't suddenly kick over the table and say, that's it, we're tearing it up. We've tried to make it work. But
we tried to make it worse. Slip of the tongue there, but maybe a little bit of honesty finally.
The fundamental point is, 6 months ago, the EU would never have entertained any of the changes they're now proposing.
Why do you think that's the case? Because of Northern Ireland. Because the EU is afraid of what you want to do to Northern Ireland. The EU understand that you don't give a crap about Northern Ireland, and you're willing to threaten to invoke Article 16 in order to punish the EU in some way, or to threaten the EU, to force them to compromise. Because you don't give a crap about Northern Ireland, but the EU does. The Irish government does. And you're holding it over them in order to extract concessions. It's disgusting behaviour, but these are Tories, remember. These are the people who have cut universal credit. These are the people who are happy to see children go hungry. So don't give me this line that you give a crap about Northern Ireland.
They're now beginning to admit that this agreement needs to be changed.
They haven't said that the agreement needs to be changed. That's just another lie from Jenkin. Now, he goes on to say other things.
You heard there from Jonathan Jones, who said the real danger at this point is any unilateral movement. Yes, you can negotiate. Yes, you can decide that you want to make changes. But as soon as you start talking about acting unilaterally, you're damaging your reputation.
Well, up to a point. I mean, I think we're going to agree on shades of grey, perhaps. But there comes a point where if the EU won't negotiate reasonably, there might be no option. I mean, what is most important in Northern Ireland is that we maintain a peace process and a system of governance in Northern Ireland that is respected by both communities. The problem with the protocol is that it never really had much support from one of the communities, and it's got much worse. One of the communities is now really openly hostile to that.
When the European Union was negotiating with the UK, they invited the Irish government to take part. Now, the Irish government was not negotiating. It was the EU that was doing the negotiations, but they had input from the Irish government. When Boris Johnson and Lord Frost were negotiating, they invited zero input from stakeholders in Northern Ireland. Of course, they didn't invite anyone else from any other part of the UK. The Scots were not invited, the Welsh were not invited. It was Boris Johnson and Lord Frost who were in the driving seat. Why did they not invite the people of Northern Ireland for their input? Political parties or business leaders? No, they were not invited. Of course, Boris Johnson went there and told them a pack of lies about, don't worry, there'll be no border in the Irish Sea, and if anyone asks you to fill out any paperwork, throw it in the bin. That's as much as Boris Johnson cared about the people of Northern Ireland. Think about it for a moment. On the EU side, they invited the Irish government, their input to the negotiations. On the UK side, they invited nobody from Northern Ireland, nobody from Scotland, nobody from Wales, even though those parts of the country were going to be affected by Brexit. It was all done by Boris Johnson and his team. Now, you can't turn around and say, oh, look, the political parties in Northern Ireland, one side of the community is angry about the protocol. You were representing them. Why didn't you think about their concerns at the time? Why didn't you take some of those concerns on board? Why did you ignore them? What's also frustrating about this is the likes of the DUP and the extremist unionists will take the side of Boris Johnson's government over the EU, even though Boris Johnson ignored them at every turn. And not just ignored them, lied to them.
And the whole basis of the peace process in Northern Ireland has been about getting both communities to work together. That is breaking down, and that seems to be more important than the protocol.
Both sides obviously invoke the importance of the peace process, and both sides see it in a different way. Simon Coveney of the Irish government accused David Frost of basically sending back the EU changes before he'd even received them.
Well, I mean, this is a negotiation. There's going to be some toing and froing. The fundamental question is if there are, I mean, the Article 16 actually talks about if there are societal and political difficulties, if there's diversion of trade, and I'm quite certain the government's completely right. The case for invoking Article 16 has been open and shut for some time.
Then just think about it. If Boris Johnson believes, and Boris Johnson's government believes, that the case has been made for invoking Article 16, they believe that, you know, Northern Ireland is in a very bad state at the moment because of the protocol. We need to invoke Article 16. Then why have they not invoked Article 16? Just think about it for a moment. Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers are saying, Northern Ireland is in a desperate state. We need to invoke Article 16. The criteria has been met, but they don't invoke it. Now, anyone with half a brain would realise that they're using it as a threat. Because if you truly believe Northern Ireland is in a dire state, then you would act immediately. But they're not acting immediately. They're waiting. That's why I wish some journalists would actually ask these Brexiteers. So if the criteria has been met, why aren't you invoking it now, this moment? What are you waiting for? When are you going to invoke it? You know, it's like there's a fire and the fire brigade are standing by. And you say, why aren't you putting out the fire? We have everything prepared to fight the fire, but aren't you going to put out the fire? No, we're going to wait for a bit. We're going to wait for the right time. I thought now is the right time. They're saying now is the time, but they're not invoking Article 16. As I said before, they're using it as a threat. Once again, they don't give a crap about Northern Ireland. They're willing to use the idea of invoking Article 16 as some sort of bargaining chip. They have zero interest in the people of Northern Ireland. As I said before, these are the people who cut universal credit and don't give a crap about it, and they're the same people who took food from children. So they don't care about the people of Northern Ireland, and they don't care about the consequences of these political games.
Now, what the consequences of that are, bear in mind, it's only the EU that's invoked Article 16 hitherto over the vaccines thing. And that was rather more provocative than anything being contemplated.
For a very minimum 3 hours
yes,
before they...
Yes, well, I mean,
I'm a bit disappointed with the BBC here. The European Union did not invoke Article 16 for 3 hours. Article 16 is not some sort of button that you press and some explosion takes place somewhere else. That's not what Article 16 is. Article 16 is a process. You invoke Article 16 and then the Joint Committee have to meet and they discuss what the next steps are to be taken. There's this Brexiteer lie that continues to filter down also into the media for some reason, that the EU invoked Article 16. They did not invoke Article 16. They considered it. Then they received a very angry phone call from Dublin and they took a step back. But Article 16 was not invoked. Now, this man is talking about, oh, this was very provocative, they invoked Article 16. Boris Johnson has mentioned about 3 or 4 times this year about how he's going to invoke Article 16 or how his government are considering invoking Article 16. So just put this on a balance. The EU considered it and took a step back. Boris Johnson on numerous occasions has said he's going to invoke Article 16. And Jenkin here is talking about how the EU is the problem.
I realised it was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, that rather betrayed a disregard for the sensitivities of politics in Northern Ireland.
So he's saying here that the EU, considering invoking Article 16, undermined the peace process, undermined the protocol. But Boris Johnson lying to the people of Northern Ireland saying there will be no border is perfectly okay. That didn't undermine the protocol or undermine peace or undermine trust at all. Boris Johnson has a responsibility to put in place permanent structures. They were meant to be in place by June this year. They haven't been put in place. Isn't that undermining trust? Data was meant to be shared with the European Union. Live data. That hasn't been done. Isn't that undermining trust? Why is it always the EU have to jump through hoops? Now, why is the EU doing all of this? Jenkins is trying to paint a picture of, well, the EU have realised that the protocol is not working. No, the EU is doing this because they care about peace in Northern Ireland. They're bending their own rules. They're undermining, to a certain extent, the single market to protect Northern Ireland. I can guarantee it, if the UK was any other third country and Northern Ireland was not in the picture, you would see a different reaction from the European Union. You would probably see sanctions a long time ago. You wouldn't see these grace periods taking place. The European Union would be much stricter, much severer. But it's not, because of Northern Ireland, and because Northern Ireland is so important. The state of Northern Ireland, peace process in Northern Ireland, is so important to the Irish government, and the Irish government is the brake, you could say, on any action taken by the European Union. But people like this don't give a crap. They've never given a crap about Northern Ireland, and they don't care what happens now. They're using Article 16 as some sort of cudgel, as some sort of bargaining chip, because, as I've said before, if you truly believed that it was time to invoke Article 16, then you would do it now. And they're not. So they're just liars. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.
I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?